Leading to Here. Extraordinary stories from everyday leaders.
Welcome to Leading to Here. This is a podcast series where we spend a little bit of time with some of the amazing people that we've met and worked with at Thinking Focus over the last 8 years. We help individuals, teams and businesses get out of their own way. And I'm Rich, and with me is Ricky.
Hello, everybody.
Our guest today is Jon Dawson, a talented and tenacious leader who is the UK and Ireland Director for STAAR Surgical. Jon has a BA in politics, and by the time this episode airs, the UK will have a new government. But that's a whole different podcast for another day. Jon is also a long-suffering but very keen Everton fan. Jon, welcome. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your current role and the company you're working for?
Thanks, Rich. Hi, Ricky. Thanks both for inviting me. Really appreciate it. So as you mentioned, I'm the director for STAAR in the UK and Ireland, and we're a global company who manufacture and market implantable Collamer Lenses, so the EVO ICL. And the ICL is used to correct long and short sightedness and astigmatism. It's really an alternative to laser eye surgery. So we have a small team that work with clinics across the UK and Ireland. They work with the surgeons and help them to provide vision correction for their patients.
Okay, thanks, Jon. So you've had an interesting career with eyes, haven't you? So we'll perhaps explore a little bit of that. But we often like to start and just go back a little bit to your earlier life, to your beginnings. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? What was all that about?
Well, I'm from Stoke, despite the Everton connection, which I'm sure we'll come to. But yes, I was born and brought up in Stoke, stayed there until I was 21, I guess. So myself and my brother, obviously with parents, and that's the basics, I suppose.
What was school like for you growing up? Were you a bit studious or were you a bit rebellious? What were you like back then?
I guess I was neither. I was probably somewhere in between. I didn't tend to kind of get my head down and work particularly hard, but I wasn't rebellious either. So I'd kind of toe the line and, get on with it. I always say I didn't really do any work for GCSEs and that kind of thing. So I was certainly not overly committed when I was a kid. So,
but came out of school okay, passing GCSEs and stuff like that?
Remarkably, with the lack of effort, yes, I did. So not amazing results, but good enough. And went on to sixth form for my A levels. I had to look up which A levels I did the other day when I was thinking about this, and realised I did geography, which I'd forgotten about completely. So probably put a bit more effort into A levels, again did fine, not stand out, but good enough, I think. And then went on to study politics at university.
Wow. So were you being pushed at home then, or were your parents kind of just happily letting you just get on with it and work your way through it yourself?
Yeah, I think so. I think they did just leave me to it. There was not a, obviously they wanted me to do well. Strangely, as I think back, probably it was an assumption that we would both go to university. My brother's a couple of years older than me, so he'd already done that. So it was, whilst not maybe an expectation, it was just probably the path that was ahead, and I just went and did it. I think about that a reasonable amount at the moment as my kids are getting towards that age, because it isn't necessarily that straight path these days, whereas it probably was back then. So.
Went through school, I'm assuming played a bit of football with your keen interest in Everton. So come on, tell us about it. How does a young lad from Stoke end up being a season ticket holder at Everton then?
Yeah, well, I played, I was probably a little bit late coming to football, maybe 9, 10. But then became kind of obsessive. Every day was playing football, summer holidays till it went dark and you couldn't see the ball anymore, that kind of thing. It was great. And really, I'm a failed glory hunter. Everton were good for a short period of time. They reeled me in, and then from the start of my first season ticket, they weren't very good. So that was it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when we've talked about this before, wasn't the very first game you ever went to the day they won the league title or presented with the league title trophy?
It was the day they brought it round. So on the first game of my first season ticket, was they paraded the trophy around from the previous season.
Yeah.
So it kind of started this, this is what we're going to see. And then
They really did sucker you in, didn't they?
yeah, they did. So, but once you're in, it becomes more than that. It's not just about winning, is it? So thankfully.
But I sense in your voice, though, that you did enjoy that camaraderie of playing footy with your friends and all that sort of stuff that you were doing at a young age.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was really good, and actually going to the match kind of got me meeting different people and going off with, my parents found a minibus that went from Stoke to Everton, would you believe? And I kind of went off on my own really and started to get to know all the mainly men, I think probably all men actually at that point on the bus, and over the years just kind of ended up going to the match with them. And
so a bit of independence then you were starting.
Yeah, so it was actually, and that was probably from 14 or 13, 14. So
Really?
going off to the match on my own and stuff, which was really good, and really enjoyed that. So
yeah, I mean that's not an easy thing to do if you're back in the 80s when going to football matches was not always a pleasant experience, was it? So as a 13, 14-year-old being independent and doing that, it's quite something, really.
I did once end up with hiding behind a police van with a policeman's hat on my head as bricks came flying over my head at Barnsley. So it wasn't always plain sailing,
Yeah, I think many football fans from the 80s might have a few stories of things like that happening. Funnily enough, when that happened to me, I was in Stoke.
Oh, were you? Yeah.
Funnily enough.
Yeah. I shall not comment.
Probably around the same time. So, but you mentioned in there, John, that you did your A levels and then you went, this path onto university, and we said that you went on and studied politics. What was the interest there for you at that time?
Well, it was literally just that I was interested. I had no concept of what I wanted to do with my life at that point. Didn't really think about it, but I was interested in politics. I was interested in kind of communism, post-communist politics, and that kind of thing. So it was, Eastern European stuff was really what grabbed me. Once I got into studying, it was British politics was a big part of it, which was not so exciting for me. But it was that kind of interest in current affairs and that sort of thing that got me into it.
What tell me a bit more. What about this communistic angle and Eastern European affairs? Was it as a young man that grabbed your interest? Because that's not necessarily something that I think most young people of that age would be thinking about.
No, I suppose it was that time when the Berlin Wall had just come down, so all of those things were kind of happening live, and it was there was a lot going on. It was I went off to uni in 93, I think it was. So all of those things were very fresh in the mind, and we'd seen them happening on the TV, and there was still all the fallout from that. So I guess it was that was particularly interesting to me. And then you kind of you read around these things and get more involved, I suppose. So I never wanted to be a politician, I should add. That was not the goal. I don't think many, if any, people on my course, wanted to do that. I think a lot of people that were there were mainly for that reason. So,
were you thinking about using that politics degree in any form then? Were jobs around in and about politics or research or whatever, that kind of stuff, or was that never really a consideration?
No, I don't think it was. I mean, I guess, and I don't really recall, but it definitely wasn't. That wasn't the path I was set on. I probably thought about were the jobs that you could go and do. One of my friends at the time went off to manage an MP afterwards. So that was probably the closest anyone got, I think, to actual politics. But I think by the end of it, I didn't want to do that. I knew that I didn't want to be in politics. It was more that I needed to do something that would engage me and keep me interested. So I'd do some work, which I think I finally did when I got to uni, and that worked out.
So what was it then? You coming to the end of your uni course, and you're thinking, what am I going to do next? What took your fancy, and why did it take your fancy, and what were you thinking about as Jon gets arrested?
Well, again, really, by the end of uni, I didn't have a clear plan on what I wanted to do. So by this point, my father had a printing shop that it wasn't his first job. He was a social worker, but he had a print shop, and I went and worked for him for a year. So that was just because I needed a job, and there wasn't anything immediately forthcoming. I kind of set about applying for as many jobs as I could, but it wasn't easy to get something that was, proper, if you like. So I was probably a bit fortunate I could go and do that. And that was really how I got into sales. We didn't have someone. He didn't have someone going out and selling printing, and I kind of suggested that I would do that. So with no preparation, no training, and really no idea, I kind of set out in my Vauxhall Nova, which was nearly pink.
It was red and faded.
Yeah. And when it couldn't be red, obviously, for football reasons. So it was nearly pink. So I went around Stoke just cold calling businesses and seeing if they wanted to buy some printing. So I'd love to see a video of me doing that now, because it would be horrifying, I'm sure. But it kind of worked after a bit, So it was a good start to getting out and talking to people.
Quite ballsy, again. That you've got to be quite. I suppose. Tell us how you did it. You suppose you've got to develop a pattern, and then you've got to handle rejection and move on to the next one. That must have been quite formative for you.
Yeah, I think it probably was. Again, it wasn't really through a defined plan. If I think about how I approach business now, it was nothing like that. But it was I'd pick places, maybe an industrial estate where there's lots of different businesses to go to, so that after I got rejected for 10, there was still 5 to go to, I suppose. It was kind of a numbers game. But actually then it became about going in and talking to people and building a bit of rapport, asking some questions, finding out, what they did at the moment and what they needed. And actually it started to develop then into something a bit more. And I'm not pretending the business suddenly became a world beater, but it, some business came in and it started to be useful,
So a sense of accomplishment came from some of that stuff. And
it's good.
That chimes a bit as well with your independence. You've gained getting on the bus and going to watch Everton, and now you're kind of saying, I'll get out there and I'll go and talk to people and knocking on doors and all that sort of stuff. But I sense in your voice that you don't perhaps think, okay, this was my first big proper job. So you moved on from working for your dad. What brought that about for you and that change?
Well, it was always, I guess, a stopgap, and with all the best will in the world, that was never going to be what kind of set me on the path for the rest of my life. It wasn't that sort of business that was going to be handed on or anything like that. So, the whole time I was doing that, I was applying for jobs, and I still remember 2 very big lever arch files filled with job applications and rejections, or that they were ignored or whatever. Lots of things, from the Aldi management scheme, everything like that, kind of just applying for anything, because I still didn't have this real clear view, but I had a degree, and so actually the sales thing with the printing company started to give me a bit of a view and actually some experience. So I was applying for medical device jobs, and I can't for the life of me work out why that was. At the time, I must have known someone who did it or something, but I did that. I seem to remember I'd gone out and shadowed a sales rep, and had a bit of an idea that could be good.
Yeah.
And then I went for an interview with Convatec, which is the first company I ended up working for. And and I applied for the job covering Stoke as a sales rep.
Yep.
And the manager came out for the day with me, selling printing, which was just weird because
Some irony in that.
so basically to see if I was any good and if I had any,
What you were all about, yeah.
Which when she said that was going to happen, I was like, really? This is almost a pretend job, you know. I've made it up and started to do it. I've not made it up, but made up what I'm doing. And so she came out for the day with me, and you know, as you might imagine, I planned a couple of calls with people that I knew, and
Yeah.
you know, it wasn't acted out, but it was kind of people that I knew I'd get a good reception. But we also went and did some cold calls, and she kind of saw that, you know, kind of fresh, I suppose. So it obviously worked. I got offered the job, but she didn't offer me the job in Stoke. She said I could have a job in Birmingham, but only if I moved to Birmingham. So I think she kind of realised, you know, I'd stayed at home for uni, and I think she realised that it was time for me to move away and get some proper independence, I suppose. And at the time, I remember thinking, oh, you know, but actually, it was exactly the right thing. She had a really good view on that, and it was the right thing to make me do.
Why was it the right thing for you at that time?
It was too easy at home, you know. It was me and my mom. Don't think my brother was back at home by then, so you know, it's just easy, isn't it?
When she wanted you hungry for sales because you got some bills to pay.
If you enjoy Leading to Here, listen to our sister podcast, The Question Is, by Thinking Focus.
What strikes me as interesting about that, Jon, is the structured you've been in terms of even thinking about when you worked with your dad in terms of the printing stuff, where you had a plan, you thought about it. You know, let's face it, we come across sales reps that don't do that level of thinking now, who have been in the job a while. You've shown at a very young age is, okay, let me think about how I make this work. Let me think about what I need to do. And had the foresight when you were then in a position where you were interviewing, almost being tested in the moment, to think about how you structured that. And that's quite progressive thinking.
Surprises me, I guess, but yes, okay, maybe.
But it does me to think about how you know, and maybe Richard's right in terms of that independence piece, because you kind of, you know, got on the bus at 14, got yourself up to Everton, you know, made some friends, some camaraderie in terms of that. And therefore, it's down to me. If I'm going to make it, it's down to me. Kind of make it. You know, that was kind of the approach, the attitude. It seems to me.
I'll take that. Thank you.
Would you said at that point you were ambitious? You know, you get your Convatec job, you move to Birmingham, you're standing on your own.
No, I don't think I was. I think that came later. We'll probably come on to that. But no, I don't think I was particularly ambitious. I think I wanted to, you know, start doing stuff and living and, you know, earning money. And, you know, I remember when I started with Convatec, I got a good car for the time. And, you know, I got a Renault Laguna.
I
remember,
nice.
you know, I'd been driving my slightly pink Vauxhall Nova until that point, and remember sitting on the motorway when I picked it up from somewhere down south and realizing how fast I was going, and thinking, oh my God, this car's so fast, and it's, you know, and had to kind of collect myself. So I guess it was things like that. So it wasn't ambition from I want a career, I want to be a manager, I want to be, you know, all of those things at that point. But I wanted to develop, I guess, and earn some money, and by that point, you know, have my own place.
I always think it's interesting though, because if people say, "Oh, well, I'm not ambitious," I think sometimes that's because they think, you know, I don't want to be chief executive or whatever. But what you've just described of, hey, you know what, I'd like to live a little bit, and I'd like to have a nice car, and I'd like to be able to, you know, spend a bit of money and go and buy things to it. That's ambition, because that's you wanting to sort of take it up a level from wherever you felt you were. So how's Convatec work out then over that little period that you're there? What are you learning there? What are you experiencing that's starting to push you even more? What's going on?
It was great. I loved working at Convatec. I always think I dropped really quite lucky in that job. For a first job, it was a good company, still is, I think, but a really good company, good people. My first manager was great. She was probably exactly what I needed. That she had very high standards, high expectations. She was really clear about what I should be doing. Again, I went and got training and all of those things, but you still then have to go out on your own. I was covering probably about 3 miles across central Birmingham, selling wound care products to district nurses, which is not particularly easy. And when you're kind of new and 22 years old and pretty naive, you're kind of walking into these situations, and it can be a bit scary. I think my first ever successful call, I ended up standing in front of 15 or 20 district nurses all looking at me going, go on then, sell me something, and my hands shaking as I'm holding the product I'm trying to talk about. It was terrifying, actually, but very quickly got into that. And I think, I don't know if it's ambition or not, but very quickly got into the sales environment of league tables and seeing how people were doing and wanting to be kind of up there and competing and earning bonus.
Yeah.
So that came through very quickly, and I think I developed probably some very good habits and good routines because I was forced to, not in a bad way, but I was forced to do that. It was a really good kind of first job, and there was probably 2 or 3 different roles within the 6 years. I think it was about 5 or 6 years I was there.
Yeah.
That was good, different products and different teams. So I kind of got a really nice grounding there at Convatec.
You mentioned your manager and said, she was great and you enjoyed working for her. So what was it? What was her influence on you as you look back now?
I think Ricky, you mentioned structure before. And I think it was that. And, as a new sales rep who's never done it before, I think it was really great to have someone who was super clear on what was needed, what the expectations were. I guess if I look back now, it was probably a bit directive at times, but that was what was needed. And I don't think she was like that with everybody. I think, there was a range of experience in the team, and I think she was very good at treating people differently. But for a new sales rep, I needed direction, and that's what I got. And that really kind of set me, I think, on the right path. And there's probably, it's probably still how I am to some degree in terms of routine and standards and those sorts of things. And I think a lot of that comes from that time,
Yeah, it's always interesting when we talk to people on Leading to hear how often the first boss has a real impact, whether positive or negative. But it's kind of your first experience, isn't it? And then you learn a lot from that experience, good or bad. You learn a lot from it. So you enjoyed Convatec. You're learning lots. You've 2 or 3 roles there. You're getting experiences like the one you said, stood in front of the district nurses, and it's a good company to work for. You enjoying it. What made you want to move on then?
I'm a bit vague about this. I have this recollection that I think a job came up that I thought I should get, and I went for it and didn't get it. And I think it was my fault. I kind of didn't really prepare properly, didn't do the work I should have done, and someone else got it. And I didn't, throw my toys out the pram and storm off, but I knew when I didn't get that job that the time was to move on. I think that's my recollection. Whether that's actually what happened, I don't know. Well, that's how I recall it. So yeah, I think it was just kind of the right moment to go and look elsewhere and do something different.
You say that with I'm picking up a slight hint of regret, maybe in your voice.
No, actually not at all. No, that's not the case. I guess maybe, I don't know, maybe a little embarrassment at not having made the effort even after 5 or 6 years there to go and do it properly, and get that job. So no, it was actually the right move because it opened up other opportunities for me. So no regret.
What was the job you were going for?
It was a promotion, but it wasn't a manager's job. I think it was probably like a regional, from being a territory manager to being a regional
Okay.
product specialist or something like that. But I don't recall, to be honest.
And what was that feeling of I use the term failure loosely, but what was that feeling like of not getting what you thought you'd probably earned the right for or was ready for?
Well, if I'm honest, it was probably embarrassment as much as anything, because I
Okay.
kind of I think I thought it was a shoe in, didn't get it, and was thinking, oh well, why is that? And probably knew deep down that it was because I'd not done the prep that I needed to do, which is fair enough, right? If you don't
Absolutely.
prepare properly for these things, then it comes out at interviews. And if there's another candidate that has done that work and is kind of ready, then they're going to give them the job. So,
Which is interesting when you went into the Convatec at the start, how much you put into that to set it up to be successful.
yeah, and then didn't at this point. But
Yeah, no, it is, and of course, let's face it, we've all got stories where there are opportunities presented to us, and perhaps a little bit complacent about them or a little bit expectant around them. I know I've had those situations, and I think the good thing is you've not blamed anybody else. You've gone, that's on me.
yeah,
That's where the growth comes from.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely.
So you do move on then. You move on to Kimberly-Clark. So quite a well-known sort of
Is
household
this a
name.
person? I always think when you see it on the vans, I always think it's a person.
Is it a person? Yeah, I
Don't believe it was. It was probably two people at one point, but I
Yeah,
don't know.
I get the impression it's probably two.
Yeah.
So you move on. Territory manager. Um, similar sort of ask in this job.
Yeah, similar, but I guess crucially different in that it was theatre sales, so going into operating theatres.
You're going into theatre now.
Yeah, so selling drapes and gowns. It was a real shift in. I'd sold into hospitals at Convatec, but going into operating theatres and demonstrating gowns and drapes and things was a very different thing, as you would imagine, just a completely different environment, dealing with different types of people, dealing with surgeons for the first time, and very interesting, very challenging, but just I guess a step up, another level, and doing something different, which was really helpful. The great thing about Kimberly-Clark was the team. The team at Convatec were great, by the way, but Kimberly-Clark, there was a group of us that just all got on, had a good time. So it was we worked hard, but there was a lot of good times and having a laugh and stuff there as well, which was really nice. I really enjoyed that time.
Who was the buyer? Who was it that was saying yes or no? Was it surgeon? Was it a procurement type person? Who was it?
It was both, or a mix of people. There were the procurement, obviously, but even if you'd done the job at procurement, so you were kind of going and having those conversations with procurement teams about getting in to do a trial or whatever, but then you then had to go and demonstrate the product worked in the trial.
So sounds, John, like this was probably quite a complex sell, because I imagine you'd got different stakeholders that were responsible for buying these robes and drapes and gowns and things that you were selling. Is that right? Was this your first experience of that kind of more, sort of multiple stakeholders?
Yeah, it was. It's a good observation, Rich. I think it kind of was started with procurement and jumping through those hoops and speaking to the right stakeholders and making sure that you were speaking to the right people. And then once you did that, you then had to go and sell to the clinical staff and demonstrate the product and show that it worked. And so it was far more complicated than previously, and it was in hospitals and a number of different groups of people. So really good experience and really different from what I'd done before, I suppose.
And were you hitting target and earning a bit of bonus and enjoying that kind of thing, that all the stuff that comes with that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there was, it's like with any sales job, there's probably ups and downs. But yeah, no, we did all right. There was a kind of a newish product that was out, and so there was a lot of work to do with that, and some teething issues, if I remember rightly. But but yes, it was a nice environment, and as I said before, good people, and really enjoying it and earning some money as well. So.
Leading to Here. For mental models and tools for leaders, visit our YouTube channel, Thinking Focus.
Yeah, so you're enjoying it. You're earning a bit of cash. Your colleagues are good fun. All that's good. What was going on outside of work for you at this period? Were you spreading your wings and buying houses and stuff like that, or?
Well, it was during the time I was at KC that I met Kirsty, who is now my wife.
Yeah.
So I was living in Liverpool, certainly for part of that time. I kind of lose track a little bit, but gradually moved from Birmingham to Warrington to get closer to the football. And so living in Liverpool, met Kirsty, and then whilst there moved to Manchester as well, which is where we still are now. So
where you settled and
yeah.
and put some roots down. And then, so you're doing this territory manager job at Kimberly Clark. Were you at any point starting to think I'd like to be a people leader and have a team? Was that crossing your mind, or not?
Still not particularly. There was kind of, I think there were probably one or two opportunities that came up then, and I didn't really kind of go for it. My ambition really wasn't still especially high at that point. I think that probably kicked in a little bit after I left Kimberly Clark, and really coincided with having kids. Unsurprisingly, it kind of triggered something. Maybe it's just needing more money, but certainly to think of needing to do or wanting to do more. But no, at that time it was very much, I was still territory manager sort of role, but enjoying doing that.
So when okay, so let's jump forward a bit then. So the kids are on the scene, and you said that sort of thing kicked in with, perhaps I need to, almost like, this is getting a bit serious now.
I'm a grown up.
Yeah, I've grown up. My pink Nova's well behind me. I've grown up. You start to perhaps think then, maybe I could, climb the ladder a little bit. So you're at Bausch and Lomb at this point when all that's happening.
Yeah, so I moved to Bausch, I think 2005, late 2005. Again, started as a territory manager, but things then started to evolve with opportunities coming up. Another, I think, pretty influential manager there, Craig, who was he was very good, I think, at developing people and it's talking to people about what they wanted to do and maybe seeing stuff in them that they could do and opportunities, and the business was growing. Creating new roles and that kind of thing. So I think that's where that development into different roles and maybe that ambition's kicking in around that sort of time.
What was it that you took from Craig then that you hadn't seen before that sort of inspired you?
Well, I guess he really super committed to the business, to growth, but also to developing people. And not necessarily saying I hadn't seen that before, but it was really stark and really clear with Craig. So, it was, I mentioned earlier about standards and expectations. That was all still there. But then there was also this piece around, those people that he saw potential in, he would work with them to develop and I don't think create roles for them, but saw roles that then they could move into, and that's what happened. So I then moved into a national product specialist role. That was a new role that I kind of went into. And I remember actually he kind of said to me one day, we were at a sales meeting, and he said, "I'm thinking of creating this role. Is it something that you'd be interested in?" I'd never really thought about it because the role didn't exist. But as soon as he said it, I was like, yes, that would be great. And it was a way of doing more than being a territory manager, but at that point without managing people directly. But it started to give that kind of experience of doing that and working with people in a different way, I guess.
So he believed in you.
Yeah, I think so. I think that was the thing, really.
Yeah, and it, that confidence that can come from that, I guess, that someone believes in you, thinks you can do something more than you're doing today, and that can really give you a lift, can't it? And I guess, I guess that's something you've been able to do in your later career is get behind people and give them a lift.
Yeah, I hope so. Obviously, you'd have to ask other people that, but yes, I guess so.
So you're at Bausch a while, and you do eventually kind of move into a people management role. So tell us about that. Tell us about when you first get into that position. What did you learn about yourself once you start to become responsible for managing others?
Yeah, so initially moved to a regional sales manager role in the north, and it's a completely different thing, isn't it? Managing people.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think you quite know until you're doing it. It kind of hits you a bit hard when you start to do that, because you don't realize what people come to you with. You know, everything from personal issues right through work, the whole gamut of work, questions, problems, you know, recruitment and performance management and all of those sorts of things. And I think jumped into probably all of those things, you know.
In the deep end kind of thing.
Yeah, it's like, there you go, you're a regional manager, go and deal with that. So it was probably quite daunting, but actually
Yeah.
I liked it, and I like that, and I found out quite quickly that I like that. I mean, obviously not all of it. Some of the stuff is pretty stressful, but I enjoyed doing that, and I enjoyed trying to support and help people. You know.
How did it feel, John, going from being in control of your own destiny as a sales guy? You know, you going in, you're as good as you are. You're earning bonuses. It's all on you, whether you win, lose, or draw, sort of thing. And then relying on others in terms of performance. So your performance is now not your performance, but yours is a collection of performances that make up the whole. How did you find that?
Well, I guess firstly the job that I've been in between the product specialist role had prepared me a little for that, in that you know, my target then was a national target.
Okay.
So I'd already, although I wasn't directly managing people doing that, if the whole country didn't perform, then I wasn't getting to the number I needed to be at. So I'd already got an element of that. So probably by the time I became a regional manager, it was actually quite good, because it gave me a bit of control back, I suppose. You know,
So you develop some of these influencing skills in terms of
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So you know, with the previous role, it was kind of more of a, this is what we do, and we try and help everyone to do it, but there was no real direction. Whereas once you're a regional manager, then you know, you theoretically at least you have more control, and you can start to give a bit of direction, and that support can be more um, with a bit more authority, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think there's an interesting difference between those two roles you described, because you know the national role, you don't have the authority to push your message through. You're relying on your influencing skills, whereas when you're in charge and hold their career in your hands, um, then you've got a little bit more authority to go along with the influence. So you've got another lever to pull almost. Um, and arguably, if you can perform in the first, then that's, like you said, it sets you up well for the next one.
I guess I would like to think it's not my style to use authority in the strongest sense of the term, if you like, but it's more that, you know, the feeling that you know, that's who people look to, isn't it? Their manager. So
Yeah, but you've used the word several times throughout this episode, which is about clarity and direction. And I think you've looked for that from leaders. Certainly in your early career, you talked about that at Convatec, and then now you talk about the need to provide that direction and clarity, so that your people they're not guessing what's important. They're not guessing what they need to be doing, and that structure and those disciplines that you talked about in terms of your early career, I imagine, are really important now. You've got a team of people in the Bausch phase of your career.
yeah, no, absolutely, and that's you know, always been, I think, my approach, which has developed over the years, but it's always been my approach, is to try and, you know, develop that clarity. You know, watched and read various things from different people over the years that have kind of helped to hone that really. And that's always the way I try and a lot of it for me is simplicity. I think it's easy to overcomplicate what you do and the direction that you give and the vision, I suppose, that you try and give to people. And I always try and keep it fairly simple, because that's what people are then going to take on board and actually remember, I suppose, and focus on.
So you quite quickly then go through head of sales, and you then become the business unit head for Bausch and Lomb, and you've got quite a lot on your plate now. I think you were you're responsible for what, 30-40 million of sales per annum. So this is, you're not on the industrial estate now with your printing stuff. This is big stuff that you
Yeah, we've moved on from 200 letterheads for 50 quid, so.
but isn't but that's the thing we're always interested in. That's where you were to start with, and now you're responsible for a big global company, 30-40 million worth of sales every year. Was this really exciting for you to have this amount of responsibility and a whole team working for you? Was it daunting? But how did you feel when you were in those shoes as business unit head?
I loved it, actually. It was really good. I think there's probably another theme that comes through everything we've talked about so far, which is the people and the team. And I think I've probably been pretty fortunate all the way through my career that I've always been part of good teams with good people. And Bausch was certainly that. So the management team that I worked with at Bausch were excellent. Still are, by the way. And we worked very closely together. At that point I was living in Manchester but working in Kingston and outside of London. So it was, down on a Tuesday morning very early, back late on a Thursday, staying over. So you kind of, in close proximity with the people you're working with kind of all the time. And, in that period, it's all about work, in the evenings and that kind of thing. So it was really good. It was really enjoyable. It was challenging. Obviously, there's lots of different facets to that role. But it was great. We were very successful. We did really well. Obviously, some downs as well as ups.
Yeah.
But you remember the ups more, I suppose. But it was good. And I think we developed well. We had good sales, took market share, and there was a real drive and commitment from pretty much everybody in that team to be successful.
What was the biggest thing you learnt then over that period doing that job that stood you in good stead ever since?
I don't know. It's too many things probably, but for me, probably it was about the importance of having good people. And as I say, there, the management team, I forget, it was probably 6, 7, 8 people in the management team, obviously managing a bigger team beyond that.
Yep.
So being able to have the confidence in, trust in those people to go and manage their teams and then, kind of come back together and talk about that. So it was that people and communication, I guess, if I can pick 2 things.
No, that's and I suppose within that as well, you mentioned the word trust, because when you've got a job of this size, you've got to trust people, right?
Yeah.
You can't be trying to do everything for everyone. So you've got to trust that you've set them up in the right way, they're the right people, and you've got to put your trust and faith in them that they can go and deliver. And, a lot of people struggle with that, don't they? Because they think their way is the right way and it's got to be done a certain way. So that must have been a bit of a journey for you, I'm assuming, that you've got to trust people to go and do it.
I think so. But again, at Bausch, a number of us had kind of grown up together, if you like, come through various roles. So I think that trust had developed over a period of time. So I don't particularly recall getting to the business unit head role and thinking, now, got to start building this. It kind of felt like it was there already. So we obviously, it evolves and you develop that, but we knew each other well. Obviously people come and go, and it's then about recruiting people that come into the team and will fit in with that. But there's no point being in that sort of role and thinking that you can do everything, right? Because you can't. You know, I'm not there to be the, you know, to manage the engineering team or the do the statistics or, you know, all of those sorts of things. That's not what the job was. It was a different role than that. So you've got to be able to lead people to get on with it. And when you've got good people, that's great. And obviously, if there are people in roles that are not quite doing it, then you have to address that at the time.
Leading to here. If you're a leader and have a story to tell, reach out at hello@thinkingfocus.com.
How did you manage the ups and downs when there were downs? How did that team come together? How did you mobilize that group to kind of address some of the perhaps declines and turn them back into the ups that you mentioned?
I think that's the constant challenge, isn't it, in this kind of role, is that, you know, with the best will in the world, it'd be highly unusual in any sales organization that it's always up and you never have a down. And for me, it's about how you handling it in the right way. So you've got to identify, of course, what's amiss. So why are you having these down times? Everyone has to be clear on what that is. But I think there's a danger then that if you just say things are not good and don't give any support or direction to improve them, then that's not the right approach. So the aim always would be to firstly look at the numbers. I love a spreadsheet. People often mock me for there are very few things in life that don't work better for a spreadsheet, I have to say. So do the analysis, look at the numbers, look at exactly what it is, what's the issue you're looking at.
Yeah, get the facts.
Understand what are the causes, and then address those issues, address the challenges, look at the opportunities, and work out where you go from there. And for me, it then has to be a collaboration. When you're working in any team, but particularly with a team of that sort of size, you've got to have everyone on board and believing that what you're going to do to change it is the right thing. And more often than not, that would work.
So a combination of getting the data, getting the facts, and looking at the data. But I think what you mentioned at the end there is you've got to have a collaboration. You've got to have engagement to be able to improve a situation and move it forwards.
Yeah.
So you talk about two things, haven't you? You've talked about people and you've talked about productivity. It's not exclusive. The two have got to work together.
Yeah.
I think is what you're saying in order to drive.
Yeah. I think you've got to take people with you, haven't you? You've got to. They've got to believe in what you're saying as a leader and actually believe that it's achievable. Because it's all very well saying we're going to do this, but if you don't know how and you can't be convincing on it if it's possible, then people won't go with you.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt like you've followed that process and the answers weren't clear?
Yeah, there obviously have been times, and sometimes there's just things that are beyond your control that you can't change. So in that situation, I guess you just keep trying different angles. You can't always have a solution, can you?
No, well, it's interesting because you used that. You talked about they've got to believe in you, and sometimes it can feel quite lonely when you feel like, yeah, we've got to find a way, but I'm not sure what it is, and when they're looking to you for that direction, that clarity, that can feel quite lonely sometimes as a leader.
I guess it can, but for me, that comes back again to the question of having people that are capable and that you can trust and that trust in you, because then you can have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
So I don't think it should be the case. If I think about, we're talking about when I was a Bausch, but anywhere really, it shouldn't be the case that everyone looks to Jon for the answer in that situation. It should be a discussion, and everyone kind of has their own perspective. And I think more often than not, that perspective is going to come from different angles. And so often I find that, if you're having a good, robust, grown-up discussion with your colleagues about these things, you start in one place and end up in a different place that perhaps you didn't see at the beginning. So that really is what it's about. It shouldn't be, for me, it shouldn't be look to that person, whether it's me or anyone else, for all of the answers, because that's not the way it works.
Which plays into what you talked about, which is it's the strength of the team.
Yeah.
Because you can be vulnerable in that, I need some help here. We need to figure this out together, and the quality of the team then step up and turn the down to more of an upward turn.
Indeed.
So it sounds, John, like you really enjoyed your time at Bausch. Interesting marketplace to be in. You've got a really good team of people around you. But then you decided to move on and take the opportunity at STAAR Surgical. So what was it that excited you about that opportunity?
So I guess I was happy, and we were in this successful team and a good team that we liked. I got a call, as one does, on a fairly regular basis, not just me, and anybody does. You get these calls from recruiters, and I suppose the first thing that appealed, if I'm completely honest, was it was the opportunity to be in the north. So after pretty much 5 years, I think, of traveling, the kids are still fairly young at that point, but I've been away an awful lot, and I look back now and I think, God, how did I do that for 5 years? Because it was a long time of doing that. So the initial thing was that opportunity, but actually then started to have a conversation with STAAR, and the company and the role really appealed. So one of the biggest things was it was starting almost from scratch. So they had one person in the UK at that point,
right?
Okay. But the opportunity was to set up a new team, a smaller team than I was working with at that moment, but with the opportunity to grow, to open an office, recruit a new team, and I'd not done that stuff from scratch. So it kind of felt like it was still in ophthalmology.
Yeah.
It was kind of different enough from the mainstream of the stuff that I've been doing for that last 13, 14 years, to not be a direct competition. But then it was different. It was opening an office. It was being back closer to the family. And actually, the more I looked into it, it was a STAAR, a great company, and they've got a great outlook and a great product that really makes an impact.
So there were some clear things then that were new challenges, things that brought you back to the family, new challenges, things you'd not done. I just want to touch on the family thing. You were a busy working dad. How did you balance that? You said you look back and you think you were away a lot, but we don't often get the male perspective of that. So how did you try to do your best as a dad, but also do your best in your jobs?
Well, first things first, that question would be better addressed to Kirsty. How did she cope with two young kids whilst I was away, and staying in hotels and eating nice food, drinking beer most nights, and that kind of thing. So all credit to Kirsty, and actually that was how really Kirsty was. We made an agreement on it. She kind of stepped back a little from her career when the kids came along, and the kind of deal was, okay, if I do this is what it means, and there were certain kind of compromises on what that meant, and we kind of agreed to do that together. So I risk the wrath of my wife if I say it was too difficult for me. There were challenges, bonfire night when the kids are off to the bonfire and I'm calling them and I'm not there, and that sort of thing is tricky. But actually, I think the challenges for Kirsty were greater. So I'm not gonna wail too much about that. Really,
she is the unsung hero, isn't she?
Indeed. Yeah.
Yes. So what have you've been building the team at STAAR, you've opened the office, you've been doing all those things. What have you learned about yourself during this period when you've had to do these new things you'd not done before?
That actually you can learn as you go. Opening an office, we've actually opened an office and then moved to another, so kind of done it twice now. And building a team and doing all that recruitment and fitting into systems and all that kind of thing has been Lots of learnings, obviously some challenges along the way, but really positive. And I said before, STAAR is a great company. The people are excellent, very supportive, very kind of open to trying things. So it's been and still is a very positive experience.
And what's your, you've been doing this a while now, Jon. You've been leading teams. So what would you say is your philosophy on being a manager, being a leader?
I think it's probably that clarity, so that everybody knows where we're at, and simplicity. I think it's those related things. I'm always happy to steal good ideas from other people. I think Dave Brailsford and the Marginal Gain stuff is really interesting. He talks about absolute clarity of purpose in that, and I always found that really kind of interesting. You've got to be really clear on what it is that you want to do as a group, but then for individuals, what they need to do, what we need to achieve, and get them all to buy into that, and then really delivering all of that in a way that is clear, straightforward, and I guess trackable to a degree, so that you can check on what you're doing back to the spreadsheets to a degree. But
I was just thinking, you couldn't help but you must be Microsoft's champion user of a spreadsheet.
maybe, but it's kind of checking back that what you're doing is working, and if it isn't, why, and that detail. But then it's about people, and it's about making sure that you've got the right people and the trust, and that you've got a good dialogue going. That's so important. I think if you lose that dialogue, then I think you run into problems there.
So, Jon, as we come towards the end of the discussion, we always like to just ask 3 quick-fire questions. So, quick-fire questions, quick-fire answers. Are you ready?
Probably not, but I'll go for it.
Okay. Number 1, looking back, what's one thing that you're most proud of?
One thing I'm most proud of, I guess, is supporting people. I very much like to help people and support them whilst working with them, managing them.
Okay, one thing you'd do differently if you could go back.
I guess if you think back to the job at the beginning that I didn't prepare for, the interview, and I probably learned from that and always am prepared going forward.
And one thing that gives you the energy to keep going?
My family, I guess. Maybe a little cheesy, but
no, absolutely important for everybody. So, Jon, thanks very much. Just want to say thank you for your time. We really appreciate it, and sharing your journey on Leading to Here.
Thanks, guys. Enjoyed it.
Ricky, I really enjoyed talking with Jon about his journey to leading to where he is today, Leading to Here. What stood out for you as we listened to him?
I agree, by the way. I think he's a really interesting character, and really gave us some great insights. And first thing that stuck out for me is this clarity and simplicity. So his leadership approach is sure that it's all about, everybody has to be crystal clear, and he takes inspiration from the likes of the Marginal Gain stuff and things like that. But he also makes that message really simple. And we would certainly advocate that in the work that we do. Make sure everybody's really clear, make sure they understand why what they're doing is important, and the consequences if we don't, and also understanding some of the potential confidence challenges that people have. And so I think, we would absolutely subscribe to Jon's way of doing it, clarity and simplicity.
Yeah, that was interesting. Well, I thought what was great was when he worked for his dad right at the beginning, and decided he was going to get out on an industrial estate and sell the printing stuff. He had no idea how to do it, but he just thought, I'm going to have a go and see what happens. And that get up and go, and being prepared to, be vulnerable, and he would have had, as he talked about, would have had to have been resilient. I don't think you can understate that experience that he had that early on.
I agree. I think this expectation of somebody straight out of university grabbing it by the short and curlies and going, I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to do something, because sitting around waiting for it to work or waiting for it to happen is not something that he was comfortable with. And you see that in terms of the way that he leads and the way that he manages his teams since then,
Yeah.
and within his career as a territory manager or regional manager. You see that come through, really strongly.
And I suppose another one as well, that I wonder if you picked up on as well, was that he had a boss, Craig, I think he was called, who believed in him and pushed him.
Yeah, he talked about Craig. He said this is the first time that there was this obsession with growth and commitment to the number, and that
Yeah.
clearly in those types of roles is important. But he married that up with people development and people growth, and he kind of worked out who had got the potential, who he could build and shape around, and that's where that belief in Jon came from, and that opportunity that he kind of, whether he had it in mind or whether he created it, the reality is Jon's approach really benefited from Craig's nurturing of him as an individual.
I think for everyone, if someone gets behind you and believes in you, it's amazing what that does for you. I think it's also worth saying that Jon's done all this while battling with being an Everton fan, which is, been a journey for him, shall we say.
And we'll know whether he's listened to this in its entirety when he rings us up and gives us a telling off for that particular comment. But we love you, Jon.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed it, please share, like and subscribe to Leading to Here. We'd be really pleased if you could. And if you'd like to know more about us at Think in Focus, then feel free to drop us a note at hello@thinkinfocus.com, or of course, visit us online. And please remember to join us next time for more insights from relatable, interesting and everyday people as we discuss Leading to Here.
Leading to Here. For more episodes, visit us at thinkingfocus.com/leading to here.